Welcome to Boundless Pursuit, a weekly podcast providing motivation, entertainment, and education to anglers and outdoorsmen. I hope that the stories you'll find here will encourage you to chase your passion more fervently, to open your mind to new opportunities and perspectives. Your engagement and feedback is critical to the growth of this show, and I would love to hear your suggestions on topics or potential guests. You can reach me at boundlesspursuitfishing@gmail.com or at my website, www.boundless-pursuit.com. That's where you'll find all related articles, media, and merchandise. Please remember, the show will gain traction from your support. Be sure to like, comment, and share this podcast to your friends and connections. I'm your host, David Graham. Now let's get on to today's episode. My guest today is a well-versed and talented angler out of Ottawa, Canada. His pursuits have taken him all over the provinces of Canada in search of fish like pike, muskie, long-nosed gar, Arctic char, giant lake trout, sturgeon, and everything in between. The guy is multi-species fishing personified, and his name is Andrew Bunker. But this isn't a guy that you're going to find on Instagram, at least not at the time that this was recorded. His collection of amazing catches and experiences are highlighted on his personal website, bunksoutdoorangle.com. Andrew's blog vividly details and chronicles his outdoor exploits, and they are supplemented with some incredible landscape photography and, of course, some really big fish. This is a guy who works in the medical field, and he gets dispatched to some of the most remote locations in the Arctic that you can imagine, far in the northern reaches of little Inuit towns I don't even dare to pronounce. Nestled in the treeless Arctic fjords in the company of polar bears and caribou, he serves small communities of native people in the harshest elements imaginable, the literal edge of the earth. But that hadn't stopped him from taking time to trek across the Arctic to remote locations for some incredible Arctic char. And while his specialty is probably the reaches across Canada, this is a guy who's gone offshore for sailfish. He's done land-based shark fishing. He's spent time in the tropics, and he's really made his rounds for a lot of different kinds of fish. Sitting here on my lanai in sunny Southwest Florida, our conversation is a really interesting contrast of locations and people, bound by the common interest in the pursuit of unique angling opportunities. This is Andrew Bunker at bunksoutdoorangle.com. You got to check it out. Andrew Bunker, appreciate your time. I've been a fan of yours for a long time, but you know what? Sometimes living in the digital world and having friendships that are only through text just doesn't do it for you. So I'm trying to evolve a little bit here and kind of get to know people a little bit better. But for whatever reason, I cannot remember, I usually remember how relationships start or how I met people. But I have no recollection of when you and I first started talking. I think it was around the topic of long-nosed gar, maybe. But in any case,
I found you, Dave.
I can't remember.
I found you.
What were we talking about?
I found you. No, it was not a matter of talking. Well, I don't remember what the first conversation was, but I did find you in researching gar. I'm very interested in gar as well. And of course, you've got some amazing images online. I think that's probably what came first, is through Google Images. Stumbled upon probably you holding one of those giant alligator gar and just went down the wormhole. And then find you on Facebook kind of thing. And that's how we roll.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess that makes sense. That was what was kind of in the back of my mind. I think it was about gar, but then I go to your website and I see all the other stuff you've caught. I'm like, well, maybe it was that. Maybe it was that. Maybe it was this other thing. Cause dude, your website is, I know you don't really do too much the social media thing. It's probably good, but your website, I'm all about it. So that was kind of the thing that's drawn me into you is I can relate. I wish more people would do it. But it bunksoutdoorangle.com, right? So for anybody listening, right. I just want to establish that off the bat. Some of the folks I've talked to, I wait until the very, very end to kind of bring up how can you find this person. But I want to lay that out there now because, man, some of the adventures that you're doing and experiences you're doing it, and then especially the way that you're articulating it and you're writing, I'm a big fan of it because that's, I don't know, that's I feel like blog culture is kind of dying off, but
it's one of the,
for sure. Yeah. It's one of those things that who knows? Maybe they'll have a resurgence because I think it really gives a much better and
You
deeper.
don't know.
Yeah, it gives such a better like picture into like who people are when you can actually get to know them more, because this, the day and age now that we're living in where social media is kind of limited in what it showcases. I mean, you can look at people's personal highlight reel on Instagram and it's kind of frustrating for me. Like I want to learn something when I get online to look at fish pictures. Like that's not that fun when you encounter somebody that's got a picture of a world-class fish they've caught and the description is like a rap lyric. What the hell are you doing? Like what? Like,
gangster on grouper.
Yeah. So, show me this means something to you. Like show me that this is like something that you're passionate about. And so it throws me off. But I'm just kind of interested in that. And you seem like you operate in a real unique part of the world, part of the continent. So I don't know, just kind of like let people know where you're from, I guess where your experience as an angler has taken you, because you've got a big variety of catches. And we could spend this entire time probably talking about 2 or 3 of them, but I want to try to cover as much as we can.
I'll try and wrap this up pretty quick. The beginnings were basically bass and brook trout. In my mid-teens, after college, I moved away from Ottawa to a remote fly-in First Nations reserve in Northern Ontario for work. And up there it was pike and walleye, but that's what gave me a taste for the North. Stayed there about 10 years, met my wife there, children. But to escape work, was often hitting the river again for pike, walleye, and sea run brook trout as well. And then I started taking trips all over Canada. My wife is very supportive of the fishing that I do, and I'm sure yours is as well. But Brenda started following me, and we did some great trips together. My first trips were for sturgeon and Pacific Coast Costa Rica sailfish. Those were the first big vacations I ever took, and those were 2 big fish to scratch off a bucket list in 2003, and it just kept on going from there. I started kind of going all over. I've been all over Canada fishing different things, and it's just awesome because we've got a huge country with so much fishing to be had, and I've been lucky to get a taste of it, and now through work. Right now, I left Northern Ontario. I moved back to the Ottawa area. Worked for a little bit down here in some local emergency departments because I'm a registered nurse, and that just wasn't satisfying me. So I switched. First, talked to my wife, who was again supportive of letting me work contractually in the Arctic, and now I just essentially do the bulk of my year in the span of 5 months. Condense my hours and work in very remote communities that don't have physicians, and basically just 24/7 get it over with. And that gives me about 6 to 7 months of the year where I can just go fishing.
Yeah,
that's in a nutshell.
And I'm definitely going to dive into that more. I don't want you to feel like you're like limited on time because I don't have anyone after you. I mean, we're kind of on your time constraints at this point, but I think I can relate to you in that regard, and that fishing for me is a lot of times like an escape from work.
Oh, absolutely.
It's the most powerful instrument that I have of bringing like, I don't know, balance to my life. For because sure. if I don't do it, then I'm in a bad mood, or it just does. I'm not at peace. And if I'm not at peace, I'm not a good husband. I'm not a good father. I'm not fun to be around. At the same token, if I'm fishing too much, you have to be responsible there too. And my wife is very supportive. Same thing. But I don't want to forsake that and be gone and missing, for instance, this weekend, I'm going to be out of town. I'm not fishing this weekend. I'd like to, but my kid's got a gymnastics meet and I've got to be there for those things. But, it's a weird thing to try to explain. My wife gets it, but I think other folks may not be as fortunate but it's a strange thing to have to explain. Like if I don't go do this thing where I chase these slimy fish and put all this money into it, all this energy into it, all these hours into it, only to let them go, then I won't be as effective as a husband. I won't be as effective as a manager of
Human
people in
being.
my job. Right. I get antsy. I get moody.
Yeah.
So it's like, and everybody's got their thing. And maybe not everybody does, but that's a shame. But having something you're passionate about is like critical to having like a fulfilling existence. But to get in more to like the kind of work that you're doing, I understand. And I don't know that world too much, but I imagine, and especially through your reading, which, you go into great detail about the stresses of what you're doing, working in, I don't know, you want to call it the medical field. I don't want to use the wrong lingo, but people will understand.
No,
Other
that's
people are
healthcare. Yeah.
other people are as
Yeah.
ignorant about it as me. But one of the more recent ones I was reading, I feel like you chronicle, and this is going to be a reoccurring theme. I like really encourage people to go to your page and kind of like reconnect with a good read. Like your blogs are almost read like a chapter book, and like you kind of expand on like every element of like the journey, not just like catching the fish seems like a small paragraph for the things that you're doing, but like you build a case to where like the climax is like way more interesting. And like, so when I started reading about what you're doing, and especially the photography that you put into it, I'm like, this is like the greatest thing. I like love reading your blogs because you tie in a lot of like landscape photography, and like you feel like I can read your stuff and feel like I'm there, or it's like it becomes something I'm interested in doing, even though you're very good at highlighting the absolute worst parts of the trip and the stuff that sucks really bad, because that makes the best that makes the best trips though. It makes the best stories. Stories are not interesting if everything goes well, but
Yeah.
I noticed that
The writing sometimes, especially on something like the Nunavut Nomad series, where it's a work combination with Arctic char, like a pinnacle for me to catch such an amazing fish, and my opportunities are so limited. But those trips usually involve me going to work in the north when they're the most understaffed, and not just understaffed in the health center I work in. It's understaffed everywhere. The support all around you, and then you've got 24 hours of daylight affecting your sleep. So,
right,
with the work, right, too. Like sometimes I have done literally a 24-hour shift, come off work and gone fishing for 12 hours, and then had to go back to work after a nap. And so as the Nunavut Nomads are being written, I sometimes just create it throughout the weeks that I'm there, and it's a way of venting my spleen and getting it off my chest or out of me while it's still fresh. So I'm typing that into notes that are going to create a big story at the end. And then the edit process is always with me huge, because I'm OCD, very detail oriented, and I want to put out the best possible story I can. But sometimes I do like to leave that negative in there. Actually, a lot of times I do, because it makes it real. No trips go without their pros and cons. But we always just hope for that big fish at the end to make it, just to wrap it up and make it seem like just this worked out just great. Right.
Well, I think that's relatable to most people. Like most people understand having to work hard for things and stuff not being given to them. So it's like those are more interesting to me. And it's more interesting people to bring onto a format like this, like a podcast. Like I want to listen to somebody that I can sort of relate to, not a person that's, I don't know, a TV star or whatever, celebrity of some sort. And I am going to butcher the names of some of these places that you've been to, because I read them like, how in the hell do you like Cougarook? How do you say that one? Like, where
perfect.
Just give
or
like,
yeah.
So I can look at your photos, and then I did a little bit of research and like what this place looks like. And it's like you're on the edge of the world. Just like describe to people who are obviously listening, and like the layout of the land seems like you take a couple of these huts or small houses and condense them into this mountainous
obviously
gorge.
Yeah, it's a land of no trees, right? So just to even make a house is a huge undertaking.
Right.
All materials have to be shipped in a sea barge when basically the Northwest Passage is open or the ice is melted, and it's a very, very short summer season. But as far as Nunavut goes, there's only about, I think there's only 26 or 27 communities in the entire territory. There's only about 35,000 people live in an area the size, I think, of about 6 Texases put together.
Oh, wow.
Like it's absolutely mammoth, right? But it's just frozen. Well, you could say it's just frozen rock and tundra, but as you've seen in the pictures, it's incredibly beautiful.
Oh, it is. And it would have never been a place that I even considered looking at if it wasn't for some of those photos. But, it's interesting to me that like to go up there, like the line of work you're doing, I sort of put myself in that position. I have been like a I'm trying to find parallels here. Like even in my time in law enforcement, where there's never enough training, there's never enough preparation for those situations. So like I know how difficult of a job enough it is just for nurses in a city to be properly staffed and properly trained, and then to take that and magnify it by this impossible to quantify amount and throw yourself into an environment like that. It's probably not too inviting for a lot of people who want to be comfortable dealing with challenges that I don't know. I mean, I imagine the folks up there are probably forged through some real difficulties to be naturally tough people. So if they're getting to a point where they need
greatest survivors in history.
Right. And now if somebody like that is pleading for help and they're hurt, it's got to be something serious. So I'm thinking, I know that's got to be tough to get up in a scenario like that. And maybe you're dealing with somebody like your counterparts are not properly trained, or you yourself are not ready for that. And you're working these extremely long hours and you're dealing with people who are not having a good day. And I mean, I know I dealt with that in law enforcement. It's like the only time you're responding is you're responding to the worst day of somebody's life. So it's like, it's hours and hours on end of nothing but negativity or drama or difficulties or tragedy. And I know that weighs on the conscience and it weighs on like your mentality.
Those are great points. Those are totally great points. Then what fishing means to you afterwards.
Right.
Like
exactly.
This is my life over here is the complaints department. It's sad, it's ugly, it's angry and everything else. And then you've got your fishing over here. And you as a police officer probably know exactly what it's like to compartmentalize your life like that, where you push all that negative stuff over here, you put it into these little boxes in your head and tuck that away because you've probably seen some really ugly things. And then you've got, like in a place like Nunavut, this beautiful landscape all around you with the wildlife and the amazing fishing and these, I love my photography and my hiking while I'm there as well. And so you just, Well,
I can't.
It makes fishing important and getting outside.
Yes, your experiences, from what I gather, it almost sounds like literally serving a tour of duty. And it's like you've got it's just a wild assignment to look at. But at the same time, like I'm glad that you leave that part in your stories because I know it's like critical to, why you would appreciate the outdoor stuff. But man, like the photography, I can't put into words. Like I'm maybe like you, I fumble over my words. I try my best to communicate as eloquently as I can. Like, I can let words flow off my fingertips a lot better than I can in words. But man, the photographs of these like gorges and these like waterfalls and the different like rock structure, and it's like I don't know what they call them, but like they look like some of the people that live out there have put together these like structures out of stone.
In Nookshuks.
And I imagine there's like a real interesting and I'm very interested in like just the culture of the people that live there and what some of that stuff might mean to them. Like what an interesting like corner of the globe that people just in the natural, I don't know, evolution of humankind decided to set up shop there and just stay there. And that's good enough. But the photos is unbelievable. I almost enjoy that more than the fish photos because I don't know. I've always been big on like when I'm fishing, a lot of people think like the people who I go fishing with, which very seldom do I fish with anybody else because it's hard to find, I don't know, a lot of people who go fishing, they're so intently focused on just the fish, they miss all the stuff that's going on around them. And I'm very much the type. Yeah, when I'm fishing, and that's probably why I catch a lot of heat because I do a lot of bait fishing. Like, oh, you use bait. I'm like, yes, I need to use bait a lot of times because the competitive side in me, like the side of me that drew me into sports growing up, it manifests itself sometimes with artificial lure fishing, where I'm like challenging the intellect of a fish with a piece of plastic. But the other side of me that just needs some peace and quiet and like time to reflect and time to like reset, I need bait fishing. So that's like I do that. I do it a lot. I spend a lot of time just setting out baits and sitting and doing nothing and just like watching and letting interesting things happen. And so actually the guy that I just spoke to, before you and I got on this call, what drew me into is a young kid, a real young kid, 17 years old. And he's already been to like different parts of Africa, French Polynesia. He's traveled all over the globe. He saves up all his money only so he can go traveling, and he like lives out of a bus, and he lives a really, really interesting lifestyle for somebody so young. He's already logged some unbelievable life experiences, and he is like, his photography is amazing. I'm like, dude, that is so cool. And I was telling him, I've got a lot of like hobbies that I like feel like I could get into if I just had somebody to like show me the ropes.
Yeah.
Maybe I just need to be more of a self-starter, but like I've always admired photographers. Like, and I always thought that'd be something that would interest me.
Oh, you take some amazing shots. Those gar photos.
Always of like a fish though, you know what I mean? But like before I was ever an angler, I was like a kid that liked wildlife. That's what kind of like, that's what led me to fishing ultimately. But first and foremost, I'm a guy that will stop in his tracks to observe things. So to be able to do that more intimately and up close without disturbing whatever it is out there through a lens, I think is I don't know. There's something like poetic about it. Maybe, I don't know. I think into like every little thing in life.
Just do it more.
Really deeply.
Just try doing it more and see what you come up with and take a picture. And then the fun thing with Photoshop is that is now your dark room. That's today's dark room. And you can, expose it how you want. I was fortunate. My father was a professional photographer for 27 years. So growing up, we had a dark room in the basement until every convenience store took photo finisher and did photo finishing. So, but anyway, I was always around somebody, my dad, in the house that loved to take photos. So but he would probably say the same thing. If you're interested in it, just go out and do it. Just go out and try it. You don't really need anybody to show you that. You know what beauty looks like when it's out there in nature.
Right.
So,
well, yeah, I guess, the thing at the end of it all is obviously the quarry is like the fish. That's where it all builds up to, and it makes it a lot more rewarding, especially when you've come through some crap to get that fish. It means a lot more to you. But those char, I had never even thought about those things until I saw your photos, like those fired up, like bright colored fish. Like it's a really interesting. Is there like narrow windows of time that you got to even get to these like middle of the nowhere parts of the world just to have a chance of seeing one go by?
Yes.
Explain like the nature of pursuing fish.
Number one, timing is absolutely everything. And there have been a few trips where, and you may have read the stories, such as the Aqualock or when I was in Kugluktuk at Bloody Falls, where my timing was just the slightest bit off, and I'm talking just days, like 4 or 5 days, no fish to many fish. The Aqualock is an example. When those fish come in, there's a 3-week run of fish, and it's 80 to 90,000 Arctic char move through a 2-mile stretch of river into a 30 mile long lake to overwinter, but you have 3 weeks. Well, I wanted to catch the beginning of it because that's how my work contract was timing things. And I get a plane to drop me off there, and I'm spending 5 days out there in the tundra by myself. And when I got in the plane, the pilot says to me, "You'll be lucky if you even see a char." Well, before the trip even starts, right, I'm totally deflated. But he flies over the area every day and says, "Well, they're still out in the ocean, maybe in 4 or 5 days." Well, I've only got 4 or 5 days. So for 4 days, I walked the tundra in search of fish. I think I caught a few lake trout and maybe 2 random char as the tide was coming in at the ocean end. And it wasn't until the very last day, like I'm talking hours, I'm sitting there eating a bowl of soup on a bank overlooking the river, and and that's when the first pods of char started to come in. And talk about timing, and that's char fishing, because everything in the north is super sped up. The summer season is a few weeks. It's not Florida where it's to us or to them. That's all year. Like they're
Now,
talking daytime highs. I don't know what it would be in Fahrenheit, but in Celsius, some of these communities, summertime daytime highs only reach the teens. So that's probably the
oof,
40, 50 Fahrenheit range for you guys, maybe 60. Like, so it's
freezing
very short
cold.
summer. Freezing cold,
Yeah, for
right?
me. But
And even the last char trip, that was, I nailed the fish one weekend and went back the following weekend, and there wasn't a fish to be had for whatever reason. They shut down, or they had moved, or whatever. But to catch them when they're red like that as well, it's a very short window that they're biting, because that's red char are fish that have been in the river for a while, and they've gone from silver to their red, taken on their red hues or their spawning colors. Otherwise, when they go to the ocean, they're all fresh chrome. They're silver like a salmon. So you want to get colored fish, you've got a window. You've got a short summer, that's a window. Um, and yeah, so I would say for char fishing, it's always, well, the fish leave the lakes usually around early July, early to mid July, because they overwinter in lakes, and they go out to the ocean to feed on things like capelin. And they're out there for sometimes only 3, 4, 5 weeks, sometimes 2.5 months, and then they return. So you're either catching them on the way out or you're getting them on the return. The returns
yeah.
are, the fish come back more slowly on a return, because you don't have spring runoff of snow and everything else to just push them out the river when they leave after over in winter to go feed. And I was just researching that again today, because I'm trying to set up a contract for this coming summer where I'm going to go for silvers instead on an outrun. I hope to, as opposed to fish the reds on a return or the silvers on a return run. So basically going to work in July as opposed to August.
So
But yeah, sorry.
No, you're good. I mean, what are you? I mean, these are just migratory fish, and I know sometimes that can be a weird game to play. But I mean, they're eager to take. Like, what are you throwing at these things? I don't know anything about char. Are they eating eggs? Are they eating bait fish? Are they just reaction
on,
striking? What are they
on the
eating? What are you
way out, they're
throwing at them?
just, well, when they come out of the lakes, they, after over in winter, over after they overwinter in the lakes, and while they're overwintering, they hardly feed at all. They don't generally start feeding until May under the ice a little bit. Um, but if you do manage to catch them, like say the Inuit do in gill nets in the wintertime, if you cut them open, every last one of them will have nothing in its belly. They're basically just floating in the water through the winter, sleeping, and then and just gradually losing weight. So when they leave in the springtime, they're going to the ocean to feed so hard and heavy on everything. And capelin is probably, in the places I've been, like their number one thing to eat, like a smelt. Um, and they'll double their weight in a few short weeks. And when they come back in on the fall runs, they are much more powerful. I mean, they've got just loads of protein in them and
Yeah.
nutrients, and they've got these rivers to get back up, which generally aren't, they're not like Mississippi or the Niagara or anything like that. They're not big heavy flows, a lot of them. Some are, but they just get back up the river and overwinter. So when they're going out in the springtime, you could basically throw anything at them. Coming back in the fall, they can be a little bit fussier, because they might not be wanting to eat. They might just be wanting to get where they're going. um, I do some fly fishing, but I can't say that I've done any for char. But yeah, they're using streamers and Mickey fins and muddlers and whatever. Like generally, there's something local.
Yeah.
If you're going through an outfitter that they'll recommend. But myself, I'll be chucking spoons, a variety of spoons. It's rare that it's the same spoon in the same place. On the river sections, but in lakes it's a little bit different. It can be a little bit more. It can be narrowed down a little better. Um, Spinners, and jigs, like a hair jig or a Mr. Twister or something like that, on those fall returns.
So,
So those are some of the things to use.
yeah, and is it the males and the females that fire up that the color is what catches? I mean, the colors, what obviously is the big thing with them. These wild, like orange, fiery orange, red colored fish. I imagine, like, how is that? I'm assuming that's how you know that they're there. You mentioned like that you knew when they arrived. Is that like a visual thing, or are you sitting there casting and then you happen to catch one that's going by, or is it like you're sitting there along the bank and you visibly get confirmation that, oh, there they are, because I can see these red things swimming across the top of the water?
There are places that happens for sure, and in the shallow rivers, you're going to see them. I just popped up a fish. It's probably one of the ones you've just seen in the recent report. These fish I couldn't see at all. I just had a general idea that they were. Well, I knew they were there. I knew they were around there. I'd hoped anyway. Fish were deeper, so I didn't see them. This is male char. I don't know.
Oh yeah, yeah, it shows up, and I can really realistically, I can probably pull this up and like stick it on the video that I end up posting, but that showed up great.
So yeah, so but that being male char, it's definitely a bigger, brighter orange and everything else. Whereas I'm not sure if I've got some female pictures here because they aren't as quite as magnificent looking, but they do get kind of a more pink. They still, I think they stay more pink and peach looking, whereas the male char get really blown up red. Um, but no, I don't have any female char actually on this. But I will show. So this is a fish that just fresh came out of the ocean,
Oh yeah.
right? That fish, that fish in a matter of weeks will be or could be the same color as that one that I showed previously. They'll turn quickly once they get back into the fresh water and set up on the reds. And I don't know why, but the funny thing is that super chrome white fish, when you cut into that, its flesh is blood red. The orange fish, when you cut into that, it's almost white to pink. So I
Oh
think that there's a pigment transfer that goes on for whatever reason. Well, probably for the act of spawning and looking
right.
good to attract the females,
Yeah.
that they move the pigment from their flesh to their skin. Uh, but I'm no scientist. That's only my guess. But
Yeah. That sounds
the,
like
the the males are definitely the bigger kyped,
yeah.
super colorful fish.
Well, one thing I wanted to do, because like I said, I love reading your stuff, and I'm gonna give you a break here because I want to read this one paragraph. Like I don't know, I feel like you paint such a good picture with your writing. Now I'm not a professional reader or a narrator, but people are gonna be hearing my voice,
Neither am
reading
I.
your words. But I read this and I got so entertained by like the way that you express yourself. So it says, and this is the experience of catching one. I think this is around when you had first encountered one of the first fish, if not the first fish on this tough trip. It says, right away, this char felt mint. Big and strong, it quickly humbled me into a soft chant of fish prayers. Halfway to me, it then blew up on the surface, thrashing. And when that ultra orange flash, coupled with its awesome size, was first witnessed, those prayers may have switched to faster swears. Knew at that moment it was the prize that could make or break my entire time in Kugaruk. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. 6 fish had already managed to free themselves, but not this one. Not this one. When he came to my grasp, the fish suddenly buckled my knees, and an immense joy and relief washed over. Honestly, I could have cried, and I've been there. And I have no shame in saying there are certain fish that have like
Yep.
got me to the point of tears, and there's certain fish that I know in the future when I catch, it'll probably happen. And I don't care if that makes me a nerd. It is very well the largest pure strain. Can't pronounce this word. Ivituralik.
Eva Towerlick.
Oh, I ain't gonna try that one. Let you cover that one. That I have walked, waited, ATV'd, stood, and a billion times casted to over the past 6 summers. Hours upon countless hours of aligning the contracts, the work, the time, the travel, the moon and stars to create each nomad experience and I cannot think of a greater, bigger fish caught than this. A beautiful life memory along with a catch, which together define a pinnacle of my angling experience. That is like awesome. Like that's the kind of stuff I love reading that kind of stuff. And it's like, well, it damn sure beats a rap lyric.
The char you're talking about is the one I just showed the picture of. The big orange one. And I mean, there are bigger char out there, but that is the biggest pure strain that I've ever caught. And how you say char, red char in Inuktitut, the Inuit language, is Ivitauerlik. So you were asking about that word you couldn't pronounce. It's Ivitauerlik, which just means red char.
Guys, that would take me some practice. I barely even speak proper English, so that's an uphill battle.
You Southerners,
guy. Yeah. No, that's awesome. Earlier, you said something, and I had to like write it in quotes because I didn't want to let it get away from me. But you talked about how when you showed up, the fish weren't there, and so you just wandered the tundra. So when you said that, I'm like wandering. I go off into this visual place. I'm just walking around in that environment. Now, I've seen your photos where these polar bears, and that was the one thing that always gets me is the photos you've got of polar bears, like right outside, like what we have down here in Florida, like a raccoon digging through the trash. You had posted photos one time of a polar bear walking outside of the building you're in. I'm like, oh, hell no. Like, so when you talk about wandering the tundra, like, are you armed? Are you like worried? Or is it even the same area that you encounter this kind of thing?
The Equilock trip where I caught the plane into the to where I camped for 5 days.
Yeah.
The RCMP, our Mounties, they issued me a gun. I have a gun license. I don't hunt at all. I went through the course specifically so I could carry a gun in some of the places that I go. And I did one other trip of 2 weeks through Polar Bear Provincial Park in Northern Ontario, fishing sea run speckled trout. And we had a polar bear come by at breakfast after we finished our bacon and eggs and we're loading up the canoe. We didn't even hear that thing coming. We didn't. They sneak right up on you. But at that time of year, they're just in a wandering hibernation. They're not really eating or anything. So it left us alone, just walked on. Other than that, those are the only 2 times that I've carried guns on the trips. Otherwise, I am taking some risks at times. And then in some of the places that I'm going, there really aren't too many polar bears around. Grizzly in a couple of places. And so I did have some bear spray on one trip. But yeah, there are definitely some dangers out there in the Arctic that will kill you quick. You may not see them coming. So
yeah, well, at least you might be able to, I don't know, render aid to yourself. But I think if a polar bear gets on you, you're pretty much done.
Oh, they kill people. Yeah, they do kill people. Yeah, so
that's
they're not alligators though.
Right. No, I don't know. I feel like maybe the polar bear is like y'all's version of our alligators, and I'm thinking into it too much because I don't know. I grew up around alligators, and it's just like, I mean, it's just like a log that swims around. They're so stupid. They're so slow. They still kill people. They still cause issues with people, and I've got a guy coming on soon that had an encounter with one that was pretty catastrophic, but that'll be an episode for later. He's got a really, really interesting survival story and probably saw the worst side of an alligator. But so they can mess you up, but it's like, okay, well, if you're not in the water, you're pretty much good. Polar bear, I don't know where you ain't going to climb a tree. There's no trees. You're not going to outswim them. You're not going to outrun them. No. You're screwed. You're done. So that one's like, man, I don't know. I would feel so uneasy if I saw one of those things. It's like there's no barriers. There's no there's nothing between us.
Well, the only one we did, the one that came by for breakfast and just kind of kept on going upriver and was leaving us alone. I kind of forgot for a minute how like the danger of it. Once I saw it and noticed that it was moving on past the camp, I grabbed my camera and started running towards it. And that's when my buddy Mike says, "You might want to grab the gun."
Yeah.
So But anyhow, the Inuit tell me though, when I go on my hikes in the wintertime, um, obviously to be careful. They feel that the bears can get a sense whether you've got a gun or not, and I guess they have a super powerful sense of smell, and maybe
I would have
just
never thought about that. Gunpowder, they
yeah,
may associate it, or
they may be able to smell
whatever
fear.
smell. Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. I never would have. I mean, it totally makes sense. I know they've got unbelievably acute senses, so I totally believe it. But yeah, and I knew that I really wanted to dive into. I say that I wanted to hear a lot about the char. For me, a lot of it is like the experience that's like around the fish. And maybe I'm just selling short, but man, you're the diverse collection of fish you have. I had to jot them all down. It's really like I don't know. I appreciate that because I love like the multi-species
Because you do the
approach,
same.
right? Because it's like I don't know, it's just more fulfilling. But I mean, you've got
Mm-hmm.
white sturgeon, lake sturgeon, the burbot through the ice. That's a cool one. That's one I'd like to try. I was looking at one of your stories. I don't remember the title of it. It was one of your other really well written chronicles where you're catching these gigantic pike. Um, and these are all fish I've never caught. Never caught. Well, the kind of sturgeon you've caught, I haven't caught. Burbot through the ice, pike, those gigantic long nose gar, which I would have never thought were that far north. The muskie, huge muskie. It's another bucket list fish for me. But then you're also doing land based shark fishing, sailfish, carp fishing. So, real diverse collection of fish. I think your ethos for the pursuit of fish is probably in line with mine, where it's just like, it's every different face and mouth structure kind of presents a different puzzle to solve. But, is there any one of those that I don't know? I think we all kind of have like our favorite fish, or like the one that kind of brings us back. Is there a species for you that kind of defines you more than others? That's probably the one you're more closely aligned with or tied to. Maybe a favorite fish.
It's changed over the years, kind of flip flops. Uh, I can't actually pinpoint, and it's funny. I just wrote about what this exact question in an article on the website, um, and had been thinking it over because it has changed over the years. But right now, because char has all that adventure around it, it's definitely encapsulates my northern life. It's definitely a favorite. I don't get to do it as often as other fish. Um, the pursuit of muskie is something incredible too. It's a definite hunt, 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 hunt. It is a true grind, and it exhausts me and it frustrates me probably more than anything else. But then it is one of those fish that can still get me weak in the knees, whereas a lot of other fish have kind of gotten spoiled, I guess, and used to catching. And then the last one would be lake trout, because lake trout is a 12-month a year fish. If you really want it to be, there's so many different ways you can go after them. And with trolling, casting, jigging, ice fishing, they are the ultimate fish through the ice. And we tend to think of it, like in Canada, as muskie as our big fish, or the Great Lakes guys, it's salmon are their big fish.
Right.
Sturgeon are our biggest, but they're not. It's not really as big a sport fishery. But
Mm-hmm.
lake trout is something nationwide, from the south to the north, east to the west, and those fish are huge. Like they
Right.
have had fish up to over 100 pounds caught in nets on Lake Athabasca, where I fished a Great Bear. Um, they had a 91 2 or 93 pound fish caught in a net in Delaney. The world record comes from there. And lake trout in their element are extremely strong fish.
Mm-hmm.
Most Southerners don't realize that or recognize that, because they're catching, they're catching them in uncomfortable water already,
Right.
unless it's through the ice. Um, or they might be a stocked fish that just isn't as strong as a natural. But these Arctic places where there's lake trout, those are fantastic fish too. So those would be my three favorite, and then my sentimental, all my life fish is brook trout, because that's what really got me that's what really gets the sense of adventure turning for me when I was in my teens, was being introduced to fly fishing, going in a float tube, taking a trip for fish into the wilds to these pristine areas where speckled trout live. and getting a taste for fishing in that way, as opposed to just off a dock, catch a bass, right?
Yeah.
It was that whole, so that's a sentimental favorite that's kind of that I've carried over all my life. And I do several trips, one or two a year now for speckled trout.
Right. No, that was actually, and it's funny about the lake trout thing. When I was writing that, I wrote that little kind of a short piece that was where I had tried to break down all of, our continent's biggest freshwater fish. I was really surprised when I was, doing the quick dive into lake trout
Right.
that they got that
Right.
big. I mean, that is a small class of fish that we have here that are in that triple digit range. I'm like, really? It's like, oh my gosh, like that's like
the potential's there. Yeah.
Kind of a scary thought, but even to be getting near it is pretty wild. So, but that's awesome. So I guess that's like, there's that side of things. And then I'm always curious, like people like yourself, people like, I don't know, it's just one of those questions you always want to ask another fisherman, like, what would be like your bucket list fish? Maybe you got a handful of them. I'm sure you probably got a bunch of them. Is there any fish that stands out as one you really want to tackle when it's all said and
done? If I was made for the heat a little more like you, I would definitely want to be somewhere south and get a tarpon. Haven't done that. And then the other that I haven't caught up here is an Atlantic salmon. So that is still on my bucket list. And I'd like to do that somewhere probably in northern Quebec. Doesn't have to be a giant, but maybe just to catch more than one and not have to go through all the East Coast restrictions and everything else. Just go somewhere and really pound some Atlantic salmon, have some fun with it. And that's probably the two. I wouldn't mind catching a roosterfish because I've hooked into a few of them, and holy smokes, man, they're freight trains. Like a lot of saltwater fish, and they're just cool looking. And because I'd hooked them and lost them, they kind of piss me off. I want one now. I want a rooster.
That's one that's on my list because I feel like that's a very realistic like DIY trip. Like that's one like down there in like Cabo and that area. Like you can go down there, you can rent one of those little dune buggies, you can patrol the beach yourself and be sight casting to them. You don't need necessarily the service of a guide, which I'm all for supporting. The people that are making a living doing that stuff. But I think like for me, bucket list wise, a lot of times it's like I look more at the fish that like which ones could I go, and if I did enough research and put enough planning in place, could I go and do myself before you think of like obviously high mantle fish. Like for a freshwater guy, it's like the arapaima probably ranks up there as like one of those holy grail fish, but
cool
you ain't going to the middle of the Amazon jungle alone. Like someone's gonna lead you to that fish.
That's right.
But it's also one of those ones where just following the theme of this recording is like I want to go to interesting places. Like it's like there's got to be like a story that comes after it, because believe it or not, you can catch arapaima in Florida. People are doing it, but they're doing it by I don't know, trespassing on private property, going on to these farms, or you can pay to go to some of these weird lakes they have over there in Thailand. They're stocking with fish from all over the world. I'm like, see, I'm just I can't do that. There's just there's no way. But I'm always interested in, I don't know, the vision that people have for what they want to get done as an angler. But, at the same time, you got to be appreciative of the stuff that's right there in your backyard.
And I agree. I agree with it. Kind of just the DIY part that you're speaking of. It's like, I haven't done tarpon. I probably could have, but I haven't because like I swell up like a balloon when I hit the heat for the first 5 days. All I want to do is nap. Yeah. Like my body just does something weird. My feet get all swollen and I get tired and yada, yada, yada. But I would have to I would have to get a guide for tarpon, I would think, and roosters. But Atlantics, the Torngat Mountains in northern Quebec, that's where, like up in that range, because it's absolutely incredible landscape and there's some definite Canadiana history there. With some early outfits, but it's the place that you wouldn't necessarily need the guide. You'd literally just walk out of wherever you're staying, go down to the river and go left, go right, start walking, looking at the different pools and catching your own salmon. So
now that would be cool. And just kind of speaking about DIY and or I know on your website you do mention. Are you still offering guided trips during the course of the year? It looks like there is an option on your site about guiding. Is that something you're still entertaining now, or is it just like you dabble in it
Super
here and there?
well. Yeah, I'm a bit of a fuss bucket for one, because it's that I don't get asked too often, and generally when I do, it's for Nipigon, number one, more than anything else. But everybody wants something for nothing, right? They don't
Right.
take into account the 18-hour drive I have to make one way and an 18-hour drive back to fish a week, and that I've done that 30 times in my life at a huge expense to me to figure out what I know, so that somebody can just come get it for cheap. So usually when I give them the price, it's like it's a I'll offer something that's like at a day rate for somebody else, but just I want to do it for an entire week, right? That's
Yeah.
so people kind of shy away from that sort of commitment, yet they they could sometimes pay two, three, four times the amount for some lodge that they can only ever get back to through the lodge. But if they were to do a trip with me to say Nipigon for a quarter of the price, half the price, they could turn around and go back in their boat the following year and repeat and repeat and repeat. So they've got a
Yeah.
lifetime of fishing to do for a lot cheaper. So I'm very selective, and then some people just don't like the price tag. But at home, I do some guiding. Again, and a lot of guys just basically want to pay you for a spot that you've worked hard to figure out.
Right. Yeah.
And so, you know, I pick the right people. I do some guiding, and I don't really go on about it too much, but I wouldn't say that I do a lot. I'm not making a living. I have a lot of fun when I put new people in the boat that are the right people, and we do
Yeah.
something that they've never done before, or just say, like, catch a personal best. I had a muskie angler in the boat that he'd been fishing muskie for 20 years, and double the number of years that I had,
Mhm.
just in a different area though. I had better water and some time in on it, and we took him out, and he put him on a 54-inch muskie, and that was his first over 50, and
Oh wow.
he got to reel that in, and that, to be a part of that for him is absolutely awesome. And
Yeah,
now
that's
he
cool.
knows what to do as well. If he ever comes back with his boat, he can do it. And but that's great. Putting people on the nice sturgeon too that we catch, the gar,
Mhm.
if it's the right people, like. So yeah, I do some guiding, but not a whole heck of a lot. I'm a pretty busy guy, Dave. Actually,
Yeah.
once I'm fishing, I'm very just like, work's done and I'm fishing. The year is mapped out. My contracts for work from now until next December, those time frames are all pre-selected. I'm just slotting in the trips here and there, and for basically the same. It'll be the same routine this year as it was last year. The fish that I like to fish at the times that I like to fish them, um, and people that want to get guided to something like yourself, if you ever come up, hey, then
That's something. Yeah, that has to happen. That like absolutely has to happen for sure.
yeah.
But
I could see you. I could see you like in a kind of maybe a late October, a sturgeon, muskie, maybe even big Lake Ontario walleye combo for a
oh
week,
yeah.
kind of thing.
Oh, that sounds great. I know the lake sturgeon. That's one that I really want to catch, but it's like I'm weird. I have these strange like self-imposed stipulations on certain fish. I'm like I feel like there's opportunities to go do it in an easy way, but yeah, but I it needs to be like this. And so like muskie is one. And it's like I feel like I know a lot of guys that catch them here in the States, like even
Yeah.
kind of close. But I'm like, for whatever reason, I really want to like cross that border and like get up to Canada to do it. And
Mm.
I don't know why. It's like I'm kind of like holding myself back maybe, but I feel like it'll be more
I
fulfilling.
know
But
why. I know why you do.
because they're
Honestly,
bigger,
because the muskies are bigger.
right? Yeah.
They're Georgian Bay and the St. Lawrence and Lake Ontario, although you could access from the stateside, obviously, but
Yeah.
those waters are the big fish factories. Oh, Green Bay too, I suppose. Yeah, you can get some biggies in Lake of the Woods, but I think if
Yeah.
there was a world record to come ever, it would be Georgian Bay or potentially like a Lake Ontario fish.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because up there's like they get bigger, but it also seems like a more of a I don't know, I want to say common, but it's just I don't know, it's just a more pure fishery, I think. But no, your gar
Oh,
scene is one that I can't like we can't get off here without touching on, and I know that that's a resource you want to protect, and I get that line of thinking. So we won't get too much into it, but I'm curious. Like it's a weird cultural thing here, especially in like I don't know what how like people in Canada view gar, but I do know you know historically the stigma with them in the United States anyway is mostly been negative. I feel like there's a shift that's taken place in recent times, but like I didn't even realize that y'all had not only do you have long nose gar, you have big ones, like really big ones. And I was surprised when I saw your photos. I was like, Jesus, like those are like monster versions, but like the public or other anglers, like how what do they think about gar? They want to smash them. Like, do y'all have a like a bow fishing culture, or is it a thing to catch them and throw them on the bank?
what do people think about gar up here? For the most part, people don't think about gar up here. I mean, you've got this prehistoric fish that's been here for eons under people's noses. There's really no fishery for it. It's a, it's a an incidental catch. Um, for most, there's only a really a handful of guys that do it well so far
Yeah.
in the area which I live. There's a little bit of a fly fishing culture for it, um, but not around me. Not that well, a little bit around me, um, but for the most part, they're kind of overlooked, and they're a tough fish to catch. Now, you do it differently than we do, um, but your hookup percentages are pretty low,
Mhm.
and there's certainly for most, but there's better ways to approach the fish, to catch the fish, and certain tools you can use to just to help with your fishing. Um, and unless anglers know that, um, the odds are stacked against them for catching any decent numbers of them, or especially catching the big ones that a very small handful of us do. And again, so that's kind of why, like, I'm a little protective of it
Yeah.
because the gar fishing is all around the greater Toronto area and Ottawa as well, especially Ottawa and Montreal. And these are our huge cities, our biggest cities in Canada. Um, with so if the fishery ever did really catch on, it could explode and just make my fun go away. So
Right. Well, I feel like there's the potential could be there, so we don't want to we don't want to let the cat out of the bag. But it's it's interesting. I could kind of see why it may not like the contempt may not be there, or they just haven't had the opportunities to run across them. I've always felt like the origin of the contempt of the fish here, at least in the States, is like, especially down here in the South, you've got a lot of people that are fishing a shiner under a bobber or a cricket on a cane pole or a cut bait on the bottom for catfish. And it's like, so people are like using a certain kind of rig that is more prone to having that interaction with agar, and they're not hooking them. To your point, they're not going to hook up with them. That the structure of the mouth is not like people engineered and designed hooks for a certain type of mouth, and it's just not that. So
it's
it's
not easy with gar.
when you're out there with your baits in the water and you're trying to catch these fish, and you're basically losing money because they're just taking baits, taking baits. They become the bait thief real quick. And then a lot of times the people are putting these baits at the top of the water column in stagnant warm waters, where more popular fish don't necessarily even want to be at. And so they're
Mm.
encountering more and more gar than anything. And then, the surface level thinker is going to sit here and put two and two together. Well, that giant fish that I can
Gar
see
ate
right
all the
there.
fish.
Yeah. With big, sharp, scary teeth. It only makes sense. They must have eaten everything. But I don't know if up there y'all have folks. I don't know, it's so big down here, like especially in the South, like people lined up along the bank with a barber and a minnow. It's like, that's like the most fundamental type of fishing that folks are doing. And so the opportunities for that encounter are just really great down here. People run across gar like crazy, or they're throwing their favorite shiny lure and they get the sparkly paint chipped off because the gar takes a swipe at it. So it's I don't know. I think that's the first impression, and then it just goes south from there.
I have days on the water where I may not see another gar angler, period. And that's moving around, changing spots. If I do see gar anglers, I generally know who they are.
Mm-hmm.
We just move around one another with respect. But again, it's a pretty untapped fishery, so there are some guys guiding for it now, and I have a feeling they will change the game in time. Although some have been guiding, a couple have been guiding for at least 5 to one guy maybe 10 years, and I'm not seeing much increase in traffic. I am seeing a change in fish behavior, but because you're I think the gar you're fishing for generally blind. You're bait soaked under a float or on bottom. There are a few people that might sit on the shore and try that in places where there's gar, but otherwise for us it's all sight fishing. It's like bone fishing. So that that's I think for why I love gar so much is it's like my muskie fishing. It's just that I'm actually seeing them all the time. Like there are days where I could literally not cast at 100, 200, maybe even 300 fish that I see in a day. I'm just passing them by looking for the one.
Right.
Or the two, right? And so that sight fishing aspect, that hunt, and it's like going back to what you were talking about before. On a nice day out for gar, you're observing your surroundings, and you're always watching the water, and you're seeing neat things, and especially you're seeing gar, and you're seeing them behave and how they behave, and so they're a neat fish, and because you always see them too, when other anglers are come into play or there's other boats in the area, you actually see the change in their behavior. Like you really get intimate with this fish when it's something that you can watch, like it's in an aquarium all the time when the season is on. How that culture hasn't caught on, I have no idea. Like how people haven't caught on to how cool that is.
Yeah.
When some anglers will pay so much money to go sight fish bonefish on the flats. Well, right here in Canada, we've got in the springtime, I'd say pike and gar that can be a sight fishing game. And that's fun. That's a fun way to fish. So,
well, you can definitely approach them in similar and the same ways here in the U.S. I've done.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. I've done it sight fishing. I prefer it sight fishing. I like it, especially when there's a lot of them, because you can kind of like pick out which one you really want to, if you just throw a bait out there, you got the one big mama female surrounded by a bunch of little runty males. But it seems like there's at least some visual element regardless, because I will use their habit of rolling as just like at least some visual confirmation that, okay, they're here. But yeah, that's one of those weird mysteries. And I know down here in the States, it's like, okay, you've got a fish that can get 5 feet long and be as big around as your leg. They will take artificials. They'll take flies. They'll take baits. They'll leave the water and tail walk. It's exciting. And I think it's I think that they'll catch on, but they also, like down here, they kind of live in the shadow of their much bigger cousin. But it's still weird. I mean, it's strange that they have been here longer than most any other freshwater fish. And yet you still see a lot of people down here that don't realize that there's different species of gar. They think it's all one thing. It drives me crazy. Here in Florida, they call every single gar alligator gar. I'm like, have you ever wondered why none of these alligator gar are more than 2 feet long? There's thousands, and we got these little spotted gar down here in the Everglades that are absolutely everywhere. But they're kind of pesky. I mean, they're a little bit of fun, but they're so prevalent that it's like I don't know. It takes the challenge or the
And you
interest
know
out
what's
of them
funny too,
pursuing them.
Dave, when you say that they're everywhere. And even on these waters up here, there's a huge biomass of gar in the rivers around us, some of the rivers and lakes around us. And they've been here for millions of years. People will still say, well, the
Yeah.
gar have eaten all the fish.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
I think they would have eaten them a long, long time ago, and there'd be nothing
Right.
left because there's been the same number of gar probably, back a million years ago as there is now.
I will sometimes exhaust the effort to try to explain that to people. Well, I will do it in person a lot. On the internet, no, I just, I won't even
Yeah.
play that game. But yeah, it's kind of funny. It's like, okay, how do you think that fish even hit the first rung of the evolutionary ladder? Like that gar was already looming, waiting on their arrival, and somehow they still made it up. Doesn't add up. Your story
Right.
doesn't
Yeah.
add
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
But I don't know. That's kind of a funny one. It's definitely changed. I see a lot more people. I always wondered if like social media has helped them in some way, or if it's like, or if it has just uncovered that there was more people doing it than I ever realized beforehand. So because now you see a lot more people doing it. I'm like, well, is it more people are doing it because more people are interested, or were they always there and now I can just see it? But I tend to believe it's like it's just kind of catching on. It's one of those things that's a little
I
bit changing.
my website stats would indicate that too.
Mm.
I get almost daily visitors hit on a couple of my gar reports,
Yeah.
which that wouldn't be the case 10 years ago. Or I guess the website's only been in existence for 7 or 8, but so 5 years ago. But now it's definitely I'm getting more hits on gar.
Well, the ones that you're
Um,
catching are really like they got the eye appeal. Like I even more so than any of the ones I very envious of the ones that y'all catch up there because like the landscape's nicer, the fish just look cleaner. They're all
come on
spotted
up,
up. Yeah, they're
come
all
on up.
spotted up, and they're like I mean you're pulling fish in like that are in the mid 50 inch,
Yeah,
what I mean high caliber and in filled out specimens. So anybody that's scrolling by and sees that is going to take a double look. So, but they're
we
awesome.
average. I gar weather dictates our gar windows as well in the season. And then I have generally trips that cut my season short. So I tend to get in about 10 to 12 gar days a year. That's all. And generally get 15 to 20 over 50 inches,
Hmm.
which is, a gar or two over 50 a trip on average. Some years there have been like every day there was at least one over 50. And I think best gar days over 50, I know for a fact is 6 over 50 in a day. And then a couple other days it was
Jeez.
5 over 50. Um, and could have been more, but when you're catching fish like that and you've got to handle them, you want to take the photos and your window's short and there's only so much time in a day and
Right.
the excitement of it all. Yeah, you get caught up taking the pictures. And gar are an awesome fish for photos, as you know, because
Mm-hmm.
they can handle a little bit of time
Yep.
out of the water and stress. They've got that amazing body armor that makes them pretty resilient to even their own thrashing about in the boat. Sometimes they get a little out of control, but man, what a
Getting
cool fish.
yeah,
Um,
and getting multiple 50 in a day, it's like that's like major numbers even by like the southern fish standpoint. I don't feel like even in the best areas I've been to, I could get more than 150-inch fish. I mean, I may get more than one, but it's not going to be too many more than one. So it's like it's so strange because you think that well
how long
down
is your
here.
season though, Dave?
Well, I mean, in Florida, I can catch them year round. I can go right now, and
That's
we've
right.
got some
So
giant long nose in Florida. Florida's got a very underappreciated like population of long nose gars. Really weird because there's some really. I feel like in the United States, Florida is probably the only it's probably the only state that could compete with like Texas. We've got some. I mean, especially some of the springs here. That is an interesting place to go and observe these fish because Florida's got all these natural springs and the water's like swimming pool water. But a lot of the springs too, they have very designated like no fishing authorized zones. The gar pick up on that. They know it. It's like it is very like distinct cutoff point when you stop seeing them. Just happens to be right when you're allowed to fish again. But some of the fish that you see hovering over some of the fish that you see hovering over these aquifers, like on these deep holes, is really I wonder what it is about the actual spring head that they like so much. But the spots where the spring is like 50, 100 feet deep, they sit right over it. And these things are mass. I'm talking 60-inch class fish. You're like, oh my God.
Wow.
So there's some giants here, but can't tell. You can
think
snorkel with them. You can swim with them, which is really neat. Blue Springs here is actually notorious for it. Blue Springs State Park. I think it's either Blue Springs or Silver Spring. I'm pretty sure it's Blue Springs. I haven't done it yet. I've seen them in the other springs, but Blue Springs is notorious for it. And you can just snorkel and have these like 50-inch gar swimming all around you. And they're not scared of you. They're used to swimmers. Like I really want to do it. But anyway, I went on my own little tangent there. But
I think it's cool. I like that point you made just a minute ago about where once the fishing season opens, they're gone, they scatter.
Yeah.
Like gar are a wily fish. I always consider them wily. Like they're the coyotes. The muskies are the wolf, right?
Oh, I like
the alpha wolves, but gar are a wily, smart fish. They're the coyotes, and we see that again, like with angler pressure up here. Probably not to the extent that you would see down there, but I know just by how gar are behaving when they were I swear when they were last fished, or I sometimes even see them and there's telltale signs on them, when they were last caught. But they definitely change their tune after they've been worked by another angler. And again, for me, another reason why I'm kind of tight-lipped is you can burn an area. One boat could burn an area one day, and then you go in the next day or 2 or 3 days later, and you're going to have to work harder to catch the fish. And generally, the one that you have to work even harder for is that one at the top, the apex.
Yeah,
the big guy.
Sort of like cliche, corny sentiment with gar, and a lot of those prehistoric fishes, for something that's lived that long, they couldn't have been stupid to do it. But I do feel like it's especially like the alligator gar, long-nosed gar, kind of the same way. They're sort of susceptible to being wiped out if people really want to, because as you probably observed, they like to meander near the surface of the water. At least the ones I've observed, they're not like a really spooky fish. They'll you can roll right up on them. And so it's one of those easy fish and maybe that's because they've for so long relied on the armor. They've relied on the stealth. They've relied on that just kind of like laying inanimate at the top of the water, and it's worked for them. But, that's also a big reason why it's so easy for like down here, I don't like to be the anti-bow fishing guy, but it's like one of those things that the guys that fish my style of fishing have waged this little war against them. And I'm all for it. I mean, if people are doing things within reason and legally and lawfully harvesting game, you can't shut that down. That's not the right thing to do. But in any arena, even with rod and reel fishermen, there's a level of ethics involved, and some people are severely lacking. But like gar leave themselves open to get wiped out. It's kind of sad. So it's just it's an interesting fish, but it is one of those ones where I don't know, especially our alligator gar, like they can't handle that beating. It's a different kind of animal. But
you got to be careful in the States. You've got obviously 10 times the population, about the same land mass. Maybe as far as your gar area goes, it's likely bigger than our gar area, but we just don't have the pressure to ever wipe anything out really here. Not yet, anyway. And it's just, again, overlooked fish as a game fish. But
yeah, all the long-nosed gar, I don't think we're ever going to go anywhere.
No. But your alligators,
alligator gar, I don't know that they'll die off, but I think a certain like genetic category of fish may become more and more rare, like, because it's like you're trophy hunting at some point. And a fish like that has to wait a decade to even reach sexual maturity. It's like they can't keep up. They can't. I mean, you take out one of the big spawners, you got to wait 10 years to replace that fish. It's not like,
well, and if you lose forage too, your population is taking more things that the gar may eat. But your hunters are those bow hunters that take a gar. That's obviously the fish's worst enemy. We see that in northern Arctic caribou herds. They always want to kill the biggest bull. It's the same with deer, and even with polar bears, where most of the world is saying, well, we're losing our polar bear numbers. The Inuit would disagree, but they would agree that the polar bear are shrinking in size, because maybe you're losing some genetics from hunting, but you're also losing the season. They're losing their feeding season, but that's another story. Like, the Arctic winters are shorter, so that's less time for a bear to put on caloric intake and grow. But anyhow, but as far as hunting goes, hunting gar, hunting anything, any animal, you take the big genetics out, and you're doomed to smaller genetics for the rest of your days.
right.
No, you don't need we don't need to be scientists to know that, right?
Well, they've luckily, with regards to our alligator gar, they've at least gained enough of a diehard fandom to where there's efforts, being put in place finally to protect them,
right
and put limits on them and things like that. So it's pretty encouraging. And honestly, I think, the guys that shoot them with the bows, from what I've observed, if you just look at things rationally, I don't see a lot of them that are doing that because they want to kill them, because they don't like them. Those guys are usually, I mean, a little bit of as an ego thing. Like, I want to get a big one and show all my friends, but people, they're eating them. I mean, alligator gar are considered, even in the most, I don't know, backwoods areas. It's like, people are eating
tasty.
them, but I've never tried it. I would be open to trying it, but I'm a terrible cook. So anyway, I don't know, but anyway, I know we're getting a little short on time. I don't know, man. This conversation has been pretty cool. It's an interesting dynamic between the two of us, because you're way up north, I'm way down south. It's like the areas that we're from are so, I don't know, not polar opposite, but just different. But yet we're kind of meeting in the middle on things that we like, the gar, the riding. It's just kind of funny how fishing pulls people together like that. So I really appreciate you coming on here, talking with me, being a big fan of the stuff that you do for a long time. I really hope people will check out your site, bunksoutdoorangle.com, right? It is.
Yeah, that's right.
That's good stuff. I'd love to see more people doing this kind of thing, but I don't know. Some people just, I don't know.
That's
want to have to build a website, but it's
that all that information, all of that, almost all of it, started back in 2003. That was the first time I ever threw up a fishing report in one of the forums. I didn't add any photos in the first little fishing report that I did. My buddy and I just canoed a section of river, caught nothing really, and went home. But following that, I did the trip out west for white sturgeon in BC. And once I posted that up and a few photos of the white sturgeon, wow, the comments and it was a big ego stroke, is what it was. Right? Yeah. It's like,
you'd be lying if we said it wasn't. No, there wasn't some of that involved, but
it's like, wow, I'm a cool fisherman now, and people seem to like that story. Well, living in the north at the time as well, I had access to basically real estate that hardly anybody ever gets to see at all,
right.
and some pretty cool and popular fish, northern pike and walleye and trout. So living in the north, it gets kind of dull at times, these long winters, and just start writing, taking the photos. It all became part of the process of fishing. It made me a better angler when I had more goals to go along with it, and to help me pass the time in the Arctic. Right? It's like I say, it's an isolated place, so you do things to keep your mind busy and be sane. And just years go by, and people have many anglers like even yourself, just today, being super supportive of the stories. Understanding that there's a process to it all. It's the boundless pursuit, right? And and getting it out there and having these encounters and even more fishing encounters because of it down the road. Um, Man, it just works for me. But when the forum shut down, they were taking all those stories, you know, they were all being lost to time.
Right.
And I had a wonderful guy. He had the biggest website in Canada, the Ontario Fishing Network, because that's the biggest province,
Mm-hmm.
the biggest forum in Canada. And he offered to build me the website for free. And
Oh, that's
basically
cool.
said,
Yeah.
grab your stuff. He said, go and grab it all now and throw it in there, get it archived. And I couldn't get it all, but I got most. And there have to be over 150 stories in there now, going back to 2006 or so. And every province west of Quebec, the Arctic, sturgeon all the way from British Columbia to sturgeon all the way in the St. Lawrence,
Mm-hmm.
lake trout, char, everything in between. So if people like reading that kind of stuff, I hope they do, because it does bring you in, unlike a YouTube video or
Yeah.
even just an Instagram post where it's very superficial and cool, but you don't really get anything out of
Yeah.
it other than a split scroll
Yeah.
on by to
It's
the
yeah.
next
You,
thing.
you keep scrolling to the next. That's right. But I think the most, I don't know, authentically passionate people are also the most silent kind of. They're the ones browsing and not saying anything. So I know
That's a good point. Yeah.
yeah, and I think that they outnumber the people that have the loudest mouth or the loudest, I don't know, personality types.
Yeah.
More normal
Yeah.
people aren't like, I get that way. I know there's a lot of people. This is going to sound like I'm a weird internet creeper, but like I have a lot of people that I have watched for a long time and I've never spoken a word to them, but I just like admiring what they do. And I think I agree that a lot of that was lost with the forum days. A lot of the sites that I started on, like bofinangler.com, or both an anglers group and the Gar English Sporting Society went away. That was a sad day. And that was like,
Yeah.
man, that was kind of like, and I started picking up my blog similar. I was in conjunction with another guy's website uh in 2011. And then somewhere along the ways, it's like, I really want to like revive that, reconnect with that. Because it's like, I don't know, you just take more pride in it when it's like your thing. Like it's my site. It's like your website. When I look at it, like that is your like portfolio for all your thoughts, ideas, things you've
Mhm.
done. And it's, I don't know, it's going to take a level of authentic like passion to want to build something like that in the first place. So that is a process I've really enjoyed. I've really enjoyed like reconnecting with
Exactly.
that whole thing and getting back into it. And I hope that there's like a revival of sorts in the future of
Me
people
too.
who do that. So, and
Yeah.
it's actually easier now than ever before to build your own website. So I did it for, I mean, I don't even know how to build a damn website. And I used Wix and it was really easy. But anyway, so
I
yeah.
think I think the written word is a deeper feeling,
Mm-hmm.
and it lasts longer. And it's like you say, for us, it's a for me, it's part of the process. It's the finishing touch on a trip, or well, it has to be there. It has to be the period at the end of the sentence to just take that whole
Yeah.
experience and trap it into, well, compartmentalize it.
Yeah.
It's here for me to go back to anytime, but it's actually right there on the web that I can go back to, and so can you, and so can whoever else.
Well, I'm really interested in written word, and I've always thought about it like this: like I can rattle off a lot of BS almost subconsciously without thinking, and I think a lot of people do that. They just talk, and
Yeah.
once that word's out there, they can't get it back. They can't edit it. They can't change what they've said. Whereas, like when I'm writing, I have the opportunity to like. There's a subconscious, like there's a thought process before you submit that, like you're perfecting everything you're saying. So like that is your real thoughts. That's something you've like vetted out. You've made sure it was right. So it's like, you know, I don't know. I like, I don't know. It's just easier to art. I have an easier time articulating myself with the words because I can change it and shape it up and sharpen it. Whereas when I talk, I feel like I leave a lot out. And so who knows? Sometimes I just need
Yeah.
to slow down. But anyway, man, I'm about to run inside, have me some dinner. I'm one of them guys that has to go to bed by 8:30 or I'm useless. Pretty sad. Got some homework to help the kids with, but man, I really appreciate your time coming on here and joining me.
I enjoyed this.
I'm glad that
this
the
is
connection.
Fun.
I know. I'm glad the connection. It's way more fulfilling. I've actually enjoyed this a lot. I didn't know what I was going to think about doing this, but man, there's more real conversation needs to start happening between people. And I could go on a whole tangent here. I'm going to try to not allow that to happen, but it's such an emotionalist thought process the way we're communicating like this nowadays. And it's like you don't hear the inflection in somebody's voice or the tones behind the words they're saying. So this has been an enjoyable process for me, and I've only just begun, but but it's really cool.
Well, you've done a great job hosting.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. But anyway. All right, man. Well, we'll be in touch, I'm sure, because you're one of the guys I like speaking with. I don't know.
Well, I hope this takes off.
Consistently. We'll see. I mean, maybe it will, maybe it won't. But I think it's just it's sort of like my blog. If I get 10 reads a week, I'm happy enough. But it's more or less putting something out there that people can relate to. That's entertaining, educational. Maybe some things that people bring up will inspire people to try new things. And if I can get a couple people out of it to do that, I'm happy.
It's real, man. And we didn't even make one single product plug the entire time.
No.
Did we?
I have nothing
Not
to
even
sell.
one.
I don't think so.
Well, yeah, actually you do. Actually you do. You got some gitch, some shirts and you got your art.
Yeah. I'm wearing my artwork, wearing my brand, but I sneak that in there though.
Every now and then I make fishing lures. If anybody,
yeah,
right.
Well, maybe one day I'll be in. Yeah, maybe one day I'll be indebted to a sponsor and be forced to have a coffee mug here and a sticker on my forehead. But I don't know. I don't want to lose the authenticity. That's the whole point of this whole thing. So, but anyway, man, I really appreciate your time and I'll let you get to it and.
Thanks, Dave.
We'll be in touch off camera.
Right on, bud.
All right, man. Enjoy yourself.